Good afternoon. My name is Ray Cool. I want to thank each of you, including many of you who are long-term clients and friends, for joining for today's webinar. Our topic today, combating foreign hackers and how to protect against the latest cyber threats. Our goal today, as always, is to educate and inform. We work hard to create new content. Some of the security tools that are available to fight hackers remain the same, the basic blocking and tackling, but the adjustments that are continually made in security tools and the adjustments made by hackers and attackers are ongoing. So today we'll be efficient with time. I'll move quickly, so I'll apologize in advance for speaking quickly. So I want to thank you for joining. Our agenda today will give some information that is recently updated relative to foreign hacking. How dangerous is it? Where does it come from? What kind of activity is seen? We'll talk about warning signs that you can use to evaluate whether you may already have some unwanted software on one of your devices. We'll go through a demonstration of some of the advanced tools that are designed to protect and to monitor and to make sure that things remain safe, and we'll discuss action steps. So again, thank you for joining. Many of you have known and used PBSI as your IT and security supplier for years and years. Thank you very much. For some of you, this is your first exposure to PBSI. It's a blessing from my seat as CEO of PBSI to know that we have a large number of very experienced staff, lots and lots of folks who've been with us for a long time. We're continually learning, particularly in the area of security all the time, but what I know is that really good people help produce good results for clients. So our specialty in proactive security monitoring is increasing and increasing. We spend a lot of time in learning and paying attention to new tools. So this is the center of our business. So why do we need protection? So foreign attacks are increasing. Of course, we're not just protecting against foreign attacks, but the topic today, we're going to provide some more information specifically about foreign attackers. And increasingly, PCs are being infected with malware. And the dangerous thing is many of us have no idea that infected software is there. And in many cases, it's key logging, it's phishing, and the motivations of foreign attackers sometimes go beyond. So I'm going to use a link to a document that we've created that includes some information. First thing I'm going to do is go to a website that lists significant attacks. And so I'm not going to cover content on this. Prepare to be dizzy. I'm going to scroll down. So you see April 2018, which is the date of this article, March 2000, February, January, December, October. The purpose here is to identify that any one of these lines, Germany became aware that Russia was behind a certain attack. These attacks each are documented. North Korea groups are expanding range of targets and so forth. So without spending more time on that topic, the idea is that attacks are regular, and many of the attacks are across international boundaries and certainly into the U.S. So a couple of other links that I've created, I've just used some summary information from them. So a New York Times article fairly recently identified when the WannaCry ransomware attack occurred in Britain, which has been some time ago now. They identified that it almost certainly came from North Korea, and it almost certainly used computer code that had been leaked by NSA, the United States NSA. And this is a significant thing because there were some tools between 1 and 2 years ago stolen or leaked from NSA that were very advanced hacking tools, and those are now widely available not just to North Korea, but to lots and lots of hackers on the internet, which has really made the availability of advanced tools much more dangerous to those of us who are trying to protect. So one more summary. This is a summary from Homeland Security information, and I've highlighted some of the information in this article. I'll just read the highlights. Government-backed Russian attackers are using compromised routers and other network infrastructure to conduct espionage and lay the groundwork for future cyber operations. So that lay the groundwork means that tools have been installed on millions of devices, and many, many of them in the U.S., for use in future offensive operations, meaning there's under the surface lingering software that we don't know is there, and it stays hidden and not woken up. And so that's a really significant thing. So these network infrastructure devices, including routers, switches, and firewalls, which typically, historically, have not been actively monitored in the same way and protected in the same way inside of folks' networks. So the goal: steal intellectual property, maintain persistent access in victims' networks for use in additional campaigns. And this particular article says they have a high degree of confidence that Russia was the source of this set of attacks, which got some publicity back a couple of months ago, where all of us were encouraged, and hopefully you got a PBSI security bulletin encouraging you to reboot your home routers. If you have a PBSI firewall, this doesn't apply to you because everything inside of your PBSI firewall remains protected from this particular attack. And we can go on and on. Intended to be a launching pad for future operations, millions of devices are compromised, default passwords being the source of many of these issues. So I'm not going to spend more time, although there's lots and lots of information available about foreign attacks and how frequent they are and what's been publicized about them. The focus of today is really to understand more about them and how we can prevent and how we can identify if we've already been compromised. So I'm going to do a search now to a web tool that PBSI subscribes to, and the first thing that you see on this screen is a graph of attacks, cyber attacks, that have resulted in data breaches within the last 24 months. So be aware that even the bottom of this graph are very high numbers. That was 271 breaches in September of 16 and 2,100 breaches in May of 17, going up to an unbelievable 6,400 attacks in March of this year. So apparently July so far has been pretty good. Only 577 data breaches, only 577 occurrences of a large group of data that's been hacked from usually somebody's website. So these attacks and data breaches result in a huge problem for all of us. What I'm going to display now, or have displayed on the right-hand side of this graph, are the sources that have been identified. So it looks here that this number of data breaches have resulted from attacks from China, from Brazil, interestingly, India, Vietnam, Russia, Iran, and so forth. So attacks, typically, you might not presume, or it's not correct to presume that all of these are state-sponsored. In fact, a very, very small percentage, I presume, is, but that attackers come from a identifiable IP range that is located there. So you see graphically here where most of the outside attacks come from. So the point is that there's lots and lots of activity, and this is excluding all the activity from criminal hacking activity that comes from within the U.S. So it's lots and lots of activity out there. Not trying to frighten anyone, simply inform that this is an ongoing issue. So I'm going to do a search for compromised credentials. I'm going to search here for, pardon me, let me go back to my link. I'm going to search credentials, and I'm going to find all of the information from our domain at PBSI, pbsinet.com. What are all the credentials that have been breached at PBSI? And if you think PBSI should be the most secure of any organization, what you see on this screen are the names of current and former PBSI employees, and in the columns here, password. If you see X's, that means there was no exposed password, but anything else, there was an encrypted password, and in the column labeled cracked, either this set of passwords, these are real passwords that real PBSI employee used at some point in time in the past. And most of these date back to prior years. And then some of these were initially encrypted, but that password was broken and it's an exposed password on the internet. Now, we don't expose any passwords here, of course, that haven't already been changed. The point of this display is simply this. No one is safe. Security companies aren't safe. Banks aren't safe. Every organization for whom we do a search like this, virtually, we find exposed passwords where somebody says, as I did the first time I saw what used to be my normal password was exposed out there on the internet, my reaction was, holy moly, you've got to be kidding me. This was not real to me until today. On that day, I realized anybody who uses the same password on multiple sites is putting themselves at risk. So the first step is finding, are my passwords at risk? We can help you do this. So the takeaway from that, I hope, is passwords are for sale. You can identify what of your passwords have been exposed, and I'm going to talk about what do we do if we find there's an exposed password. We can't close Pandora's box, but what we can do is change our passwords and don't use the same passwords, and for most of us that means use a password manager. So all we've done so far really is talk about the scope of the threat that's out there. So here are, and we have summarized this from some other articles we've seen that do a pretty good job of summarizing warning signs. So I want to say, if you see more than one of these occurring on your PC or PCs in your organization, it doesn't necessarily mean you have been attacked. But these are warning signs that should cause each of us to sit up and take notice. So your PC suddenly slows down. You know, PCs don't get slower over time. It's common, oh, that PC's old, it's gotten slower. Well, some elements of that are true. If you have previous software that's been uninstalled, that didn't uninstall completely, that's pretty frequent. There can be processes that continue to run that really do result from time. However, unseen processes may include very dangerous things like keyloggers or other items that really don't take up much RAM. They're basically sleeping there waiting for somebody to wake them up. But if your PC slows down unexpectedly, then it's a warning sign. You're using more data than usual. So this is something most of us have no idea, no way to understand whether our hard drive on our PC or even our server is gaining density. So one of the things that PBSI monitors for every client is disk growth. And we do it for this reason, that if something's accumulating on your disk drive that's growing at a rate of more than 5% in a day, then something's behind that. So this could be logs, key logging, all kinds of logging that's going on, or it could be gathering data from other places and centralizing it. There's more than one reason why your data may grow. Another thing, videos buffer more than usual, and web pages take, quote, forever to load. So this could be that your internet is slow, and internet, frustratingly for all of us, does have some variabilities. And it could mean that you need to reboot, which is always the first step to try. But on the other hand, if this is a continuing issue and you're convinced it's not your internet, or even if you suspect it might be, contact us at PBSI, or if you use a different support provider, contact your support provider and have this looked at. We do this online activity for clients at no additional charge for security clients. So let us know if you see things that seem to be really taking longer. And I'll show you some of the tools we use to analyze if somebody does engage us to take a look. If you see reliability issues start to happen, programs closing, apps crashing, don't ignore that warning sign. That should not be happening. It could be a sign there's something else going on. You start seeing more pop-up ads. So this is, in many cases, dependent on each of us, the end user. We control pop-up ads and their occurrence by the things we subscribe to, by the things that sites that we go to, where we possibly unknowingly approve the ability of that site to produce pop-up ads. And it comes in some cases from Windows settings, where we permit Google or Microsoft or whoever to use the information they learn from our internet web searching to produce advertising that is, quote, customized for us. Well, some of us really don't want advertising at all. So one of the values of the particular antivirus software we use, Bitdefender, it's the highest rated antivirus on the planet, but one of the things it's really strong at is identifying ad software that may be causing speed issues. And certainly if you see unexplained online activity, call support immediately. It was within the last month I got a phone call from a client who asked, is it a problem that all of a sudden I have a web browser looking at a site that I've never looked at before? Yes, that's a problem. And I had the person unplug their network cable immediately and transfer to support. That is something that in no way should be minimized. So again, this is not a experience in frightening. It's hopefully an educational thing where we can share with our employees what to look for. Don't just assume that your PC is old when it starts behaving ineffectively or slowly. Okay, so what are the principles that we employ in fighting cyber attacks? So some of these have been advanced recently. Some of this is the same stuff we provide for every security client. So first, you need to have a firewall, and it needs to be set up correctly so that it's silent, not responding to requests from the outside, redirecting or blocking typical hacker ports. It's not expensive, it's not difficult, it just requires a little bit of expertise in the setup of the firewall to make sure your firewall protects you. There's technology involved in the SonicWall firewalls we use called deep packet inspection, where it's analyzing packets in and out. And one reason why we recommend firewall upgrades to clients is that firewalls are asked to do a lot more today than even 2 and 3 years ago, because the software running on that firewall is becoming much more active in analyzing packets in and out. And there's a fairly new option we've demonstrated before called Capture that allows traffic to be, if there's an incoming email with an attachment and the attachment is deemed to be possibly threatening, that is sent actually outside of the building to a secure site where it's exploded, as in a bomb being exploded by a bomb squad inside of a secure container, to see if there's any damage attempted. And if it's okay, it sends it on through. In the interim, it says, your message has been held while we're analyzing this message for possible issues. So the technologies involved in your firewall, that's perimeter security, step one. Desktop security, the single most active place for security issues is on the desktop. So desktop security includes good, current, up-to-date antivirus and malware protection. Patch management cannot be overstated. This is ensuring that all of the software on your PCs, each one, is completely up to date. So that means Windows, Microsoft products, Adobe products, Apple products. There are hundreds of products where we oversee patch management, meaning if there are any updates available, we ensure that they're installed. And the manual involvement of somebody online is really important here. And most of us, I'll speak for myself, sitting at my desk, I don't want to look and see if all my patches are up to date. I want somebody to be doing that on my behalf and let me know if there's an issue. And then vulnerability scanning, which really should happen daily, that is going to look for a number of issues. That's what tells us if there's something going on that's unexpected or undesired. So these are the elements that are really critical about desktop security. Network monitoring, it's important, I believe, that every PC be monitored, because you don't know when something occurs and you want to be able to catch it early. Vulnerability alerts, data breach risk intelligence is an optional component of this, where we can run a scan each night that finds unprotected, meaning unencrypted, personally identifying or healthcare identifying information, social security numbers, dates of birth, credit card numbers, that kind of thing that a hacker would find valuable. And the purpose there is to identify, if my PC were hacked, what would they find that might be of value to them? Because a part of protection is eliminating things that could be at risk. And then increasingly, we're monitoring things that the general categories, Internet of Things, that can include refrigerators and copiers, but it includes switches, wireless access points, UPSs. I'll show you a short example of how this works, but monitoring of devices to make sure there's been no compromise. It's all a part of it. And then finally, we need to make sure that we have disaster recovery that's really secure. And the most important component of that is backup that is encrypted locally and duplicated on the internet. So this is just kind of basic blocking and tackling to make sure that if the worst possible event happens, whether it's physical disaster, hurricanes or whatever, or it's electronic disaster where ransomware has locked our entire network, that there's an assured way to recover. Okay, so these are the principles. Now I'm going to do a short demonstration of how some of these things work. And to do that, I'm going to go to PBSI's dashboard. So our security dashboard, on the left-hand side, we list all the clients who are being monitored. Now, in my case, I've limited the things displayed on the right-hand side just to devices at PBSI. I don't want to expose any client information, but we have a group of folks who all day long are engaged with this monitoring dashboard, and the principle is we're either looking at servers, workstations, or everything together, or mobile devices. We can look at different components. But in this case, I have servers, and this lists all the servers at PBSI. The idea is we're paying attention. We, the technicians involved in dashboard support, are paying attention to green, yellow, red. So all of these are green. So that means nothing urgent going on. That's really good. All of our servers seem to be okay. And then that's broken down into components. So is the online backup working okay? Is the web protection working okay? Are the daily safety checks all okay? So once I select in the north panel a particular device, I'm going to select our site concentrator, to which we have a lot of devices connected. In the south panel, I'm given information about that. So the whole idea is if something is red, it's going to pop up to the very top, so that no matter whether I'm looking at PBSI or all clients together, things that show red are going to pop up and cause alerts. So yellow items are things that need attention, but they're probably not critical. So in this case, I see that performance on this particular server could be an issue, and if a field engineer wanted to dive into this, they could see that memory. That one thing they might take away from this, here's the red line, here's the designated place at which we feel like it shouldn't exceed that without compromise. And in fact, there may be some issues where this server may need some additional RAM. Processor utilization, we can see that each CPU on this particular server is fairly minimally used, so the processor's fine. Physical disk usage in this case is very low, so there's nothing really urgent going on that particular server. So here's an interesting check. I mentioned the Internet of Things. We have a check set up for a printer, and we have a printer in our field engineering group where the yellow toner, where 1200 is full, it's at 120. So that means 10%. So it's getting near to be needing replacement. So many printers today alert the user at the PC, and so this isn't generally a critical thing. It's certainly not a security thing, but it's the kind of thing that can be checked. And we also have a check on bandwidth. So if I had, now our internet at PBSI is really good. If we had a bandwidth issue, then one of the first things we would do at PBSI, so a client calls us and says our internet is slow, if we're monitoring your firewall, we know, in this case it's received bandwidth, transmitted bandwidth over the last 24 hours. So the left-hand side, everything over the last 24 hours, the right-hand side over the last 8 days. So the question is, if there's a speed issue, is it right now? What's the last 24 hours look like? What's the last 8 days look like? And so here, something's been going on where we've been receiving a lot of data. Doesn't present a particular problem. We have 100 gigabits of bandwidth available, so it doesn't really reach the maximum of our connection. But we've said alert us if the usage is over 40 gigabytes. So this is something where our internal security administrator would be aware of this. He got an alert when these things went over the red line and would dig into what happened. So, and then over the last 8 days, we can see there's the most recent activity, there's a prior activity. So usually this kind of thing, received bandwidth would be updates going on where a lot of software is being downloaded at one time. I don't know what the explanation for this is, but I'm glad it's not my job to know that. So transmitted bandwidth over the last 24 hours and over the last 8 days. And this can be drilled into further. So the whole idea, I'm not trying to teach anyone how to be a technician here, but the idea is from the dashboard level, we can be alerted, and then we can drill in to learn more and ultimately connect to a device specifically to get on line and fix something that's going wrong. So the kinds of things that are being monitored include performance. So that would tell us if there may be some malware going on that's impacting performance, whether websites are up, whether print spoolers and physical things are working, and we can see security things. So one of the things we're always paying attention to is failed login attempts. So there's been one failed login attempt on this server. that would be somebody who miskeyed their password or forgot their password, and we don't care. When that gets to be 2,000 or 3,000 or 5,000 failed logins in a day, then we care, and we're looking at where are those coming from, and typically it's one of those sources that might be in the U.S. or it might be from outside the U.S. where we can block an IP range and there's some attack going on. It's not succeeding, but failed logins are a critical thing that we're alerted to. Physical health, growth in disk space, and other critical events. So I'm not going to go further into that. We're talking about servers here, but we're monitoring servers for a host of performance and security things. Workstations, the issue becomes more complex. So at PBSI, these are all of our PCs that are being monitored. I'm now going to limit the search to any PCs that have the name Ray in them. And so this is my desktop. PBSI cool. That's me. That's my the PC I'm sitting in front of, operating my mouse as you listen to my voice. This is my desktop. Ray, sitting in his desktop, if I'm a typical end user, has no idea about the set of stuff that has been going on, or doesn't know whether my disk space has been growing, doesn't know whether any of these things are going on. So Ray is not paying attention to this. I am at this moment, but the dashboard staff is paying attention to this. So the kinds of things that are evaluated, and here's my Microsoft Surface. There's some kind of indicator here that there's a pending patch. So that's good. That's what we want, is patches to be updated as they occur. So the checks that happen here are updated antivirus, updated patches, bandwidth coming into this particular PC, vulnerabilities. So there's a vulnerability scan run nightly for every single client, for every single PC, and anything that's important will be highlighted with something red. So there's a missing patch on this PC, but no big deal. That'll be handled automatically. Nothing red or yellow to look at. But I'm going to dig further into Ray's PC, and I'm going to look for status of patches. Okay, so there's a missing patch. That's what we saw before, and it's a Windows update. So missing is in categories. Missing, generally, we update patches twice a week at PBSI. We do for most clients as well. So something might be missing for a period of time. But if it's urgent, then it will be updated. Like patches are labeled as critical. Critical patches will be updated more frequently. So if a dashboard technician sees this missing, they might right-click on it and say approve, and that will be approved. And now it's in the pending status. So this is the kind of thing we're doing routinely. For PBSI, we subdivide every client among a group of dashboard managers. So a dashboard manager might have 30 or 40 clients that they oversee, and on a regular basis, at least once a month, frequently, much more frequently than that, they're going through manually each PC on each client, and they're doing this check on patches. And so if I go to my Surface now, we can see patches there. There are 3 that are pending. If we go to Ray's home PC that's also being monitored, there's one that's missing. Well, occasionally we'll find something here called failed. So the patch was attempted and failed. We don't know why patches failed. We do all kinds of things to avoid that. We reboot PCs in advance of installing updates automatically online. But when they do fail, the only thing that makes it happen is they can choose the status and say reprocess failed. And it's surprising how frequently that's needed. The point there is we all should have our PCs set, and all PBSI clients, we automatically set on your behalf that your PCs automatically update patches. But if they don't, if it fails because a file was open or some combination of software on the PC caused it to fail, that patch may be uninstalled for years into the future until somebody goes and looks at it and says, why did that one fail? So updated patches are critical. The most common way that a hacker gets into a PC is through an unupdated security patch, where it's already been announced by the vendor that there was a security problem, the problem was fixed, it's now available for install. Now everybody worldwide, all the bad guys, are aware that that security flaw is existing out there for any version of that particular software prior to XYZ. So patches must be kept up to date. So other things that can be seen online, we can see the status of virus activity. So here on Ray's home desktop, there are no threats found. Great, that's what we want to see. On Ray's work PC, I can see the history here. that there was a virus, and I can tell you personally, I'm very, very, very careful about what I click on. So how this virus got on my PC and was disinfected in May, I have no idea. But these things happen, I want to say inexplicably, but the point is that didn't turn into an active virus because it was detected, deleted, disinfected, quarantined. This is a routine process that goes on automatically, and then we're manually checking the status of virus on every PC. So have the right tools in place so the right things are monitored, and then have a monitoring resource like PBSI paying attention to make sure these things are okay. We can also at PBSI see what software is installed on each PC. So Ray uses Adobe Acrobat DC and uses Crystal Reports and so forth. So the value of this is if a PC has an issue and the end user contacts us or we contact the end user and say, is your PC running slowly? It seems like your performance is worse than it should be. We can look and see what software is running, and if we see some software on that list that, why would that be there? Do you use a piece of software like that? We can uninstall it remotely and help clean up what should be cleaned up. Okay, monitoring, very important. So we've looked at how antivirus is installed for every client and updated automatically, how patches are reviewed, how nightly vulnerability scans are run that show up alerts. And in fact, the vulnerability scan is nightly, but the alerts are run hourly, and they're monitored. We can also do the same monitoring we do on network devices like switches and firewalls and printers, as you saw an example. So there's another feature I'm going to talk about. This is optional, and so I'd say maybe 30% of our security clients have this installed, and others don't. There's a monthly fee, $3 a month per PC for this to be run. And it's called Data Breach Risk Intelligence. So that is a task, and that task is running on Ray's PC. So what can be learned by the security scan, the PCI, and the data breach scan? Each night, Ray's PC is scanned automatically. And I'm going to now take the role of a technician who may have been alerted that there was some information on Ray's PC that exceeds a limit. And last night, the scan run on Ray's PC found what it considers to be $4,400 worth of potentially useful to a hacker data. It includes some MasterCard numbers, some Social Security numbers, some dates of birth. And so these are all contained in documents. And how did it value this? First of all, each piece of data has a value on the dark web. If it's just a name by itself, valueless. Include a Social Security number, adds more value. Include a date of birth, it's worth more. Include a credit card number, a CCV number, and so forth. The more data that sits associated with a name, the more valuable that data is. So we have PCs that when we first scan them have hundreds of thousands or over $1 million worth of data, which doesn't really mean that they're about to lose $1 million. It means that that PC has unencrypted data on that PC. A lot of times it's an Excel file, it's a PDF of a report, it's a billing report, it's a list of employees with Social Security numbers. There are all kinds of examples. And if that PC were hacked, then the hacker could find the data. We found the data. So the purpose of this scan is to say, hey, there's some data there, and then PBSI can see exactly what the contents are. So these list of files right here, these are the files that include data, and I can see when I click on one of these that there's Ray and Kristen's federal tax return. Well, actually, sure enough, Ray's tax return is stored in my documents folder. I won't keep it there, but this would be a heads up to Ray to delete that or encrypt it, one of the two. And then I have a file I keep here regularly, dummy Social Security numbers. They look like Social Security numbers. They show up on the scan as Social Security numbers. It's a test file. I keep it here so that this has something to find, and so forth. So it's actually important, and I did not know that I still had my tax return stored on this documents folder until I looked at this in preparation for today's demonstration. So it tells you that the idea we all have data, or not all of us actually. An employee who just comes, does their job, and goes home and never does anything with patient or client data or credit cards or payroll, they probably won't have any of this kind of data on their PC. So you don't have to have all PCs monitored. So that is data breach risk intelligence. So my final thing that I'm going to demonstrate, and then we'll be quickly wrapping up, is an overview of online backup. So when we set up online backup for a device, of course, if a backup fails, we get an immediate alert. I shouldn't say of course, we get an immediate alert, and then we can drill into, so what happened? So what you're seeing here is one device that's being backed up, how much of it is being backed up, how much of the storage is used, and what we want to see is for the last 30 days, a green line on top of every day. That means there was a successful backup of all requested files that day, and I can go over each day and find out how much data was backed up, how long it took to back up the data, and what we're looking for, what we get alerted to, of course, is unsuccessful or partially successful backups. And here sits today, where, of course, no backup's been done yet because we have it set to run at night. So this is part 2 of effective online backup. That being, there's a disconnected copy. Each of these sets of data are for a different day. We could recreate a server or a PC for this day, or we can drill in and find one file from that day or one file from that day. It's disconnected from the server, so if the server was damaged, there's no way to reconnect it by a hacker to this online backup. So multiple copies of online backup that are disconnected. That's part 2 of online backup. Part 1 is each night before this online backup is run, there's a local backup run to an external device at the client site that is encrypted. Encrypted means at a very high level that if ransomware attacks a certain device, a PC or a server, that ransomware almost always, the very first things it does is it tries to encrypt all the files on the local PC, and then it looks for any network shares, any connected external hard drives, anything it can get to, and it encrypts those all before, and maybe it steals a copy of those all before it displays a message to the end user that says, you've been affected by ransomware, here are your instructions to pay money to free your units back up. The most hateful message, and we still see on a regular basis, maybe on average once a week or once every other week, clients being impacted by ransomware, and it's really ugly. If that particular PC or server had online backup going on, then we could recover to last night and thumb our noses at the attacker. So online backup, useful. So those are some of the tools available on site. I want to say that training, I'm not going to discuss this slide, but we've created several training outlines that are really helpful and really important in training employees. So among the training, the protection things we need to do, we need to train our staff. Our weakest link is the person who clicks on the wrong thing in an email because we forgot to train them, and we thought, well, they're not a, quote, important employee, so we didn't give them the same level of attention to our HIPAA training or our PCI training, and all of a sudden they infected our network because they clicked on an unsolicited email, or they clicked on an email where you get your news from your email. So these are the principles. Don't click on unsolicited emails without being very, very careful. Don't get your news from your email. Always be aware. Don't use public Wi-Fi for anything that requires a password. So there's good content here, but the purpose of this slide is simply to say we've got all kinds of training content, some of which we provide for free. We also do very low-cost on-site training, very low-cost online training. We want to help train your staff, and we've got all kinds of materials to do it. So related to that one time is we're a reseller for KnowBe4, which is a really, really fantastic. We use it at PBSI for all of our staff. We have many clients signed up for this. If you're not aware that we're doing KnowBe4 security training for you, then let us know, because this is something where there's a fee associated with it. And generally, it's $3 a month per employee, but it can be less than that depending on the size of the organization. And what happens is we set up a program where you get regular content that comes from KnowBe4, and they update content all the time. We have an entire webinar related to how this KnowBe4 training works. It's really great. It's a combination of baseline testing, trying to get employees to click on the wrong thing and letting us know who probably or likely needs some training, and then ongoing training through a variety of phishing emails, security tip emails, training videos, some of which have quizzes, interactive exercises, and ongoing information about latest threats, which are very, very current. So this ongoing training program is really well worth it, and we all have a responsibility in protecting our network to make sure our employees are trained. So training, big part of it. Okay, summarizing recommended steps in fighting cyber attacks. Have a firewall that's set up correctly. Make sure your devices don't have default passwords. So if PBSI is providing your security, we won't let you use the password on a firewall or a router or an access point. But devices come out of boxes and people do it all the time. It's one of the main things that hackers take advantage of is default passwords. Employee passwords, we can help you identify which ones have been compromised, but employees need to know to change passwords and don't use the same passwords. It's a critical prevention tool because emails come in that aren't blocked by a spam filter and they already know an employee's email address and can provide some interesting information that makes the employee think, well, they already know me, they have my social security number. So making sure that we don't give them access to more than they already have access to. Changing passwords is critical. Make sure antivirus is up to date, that your patches are being actively managed and updated, and that you've trained your employees. So those are the protection things that really all of us, we need to be doing these things. How do I know ongoing that my network is clean? Make sure I have monitoring in place on my servers and PCs. Monitor firewalls, switches, and wireless access points. This is something that we have available. For some of you, this will be new. We don't monitor your switches and your access points because it's something that's come about. We've communicated this, but I know all of us have the difficulty with having too many emails. So just know that we can monitor your other network devices in addition to your PCs and servers. Have a daily vulnerability scan run. So we do this as part of online monitoring. Risk intelligence isn't as required, but I would consider it required for somebody who's responsible for HIPAA and they have potential PHI on their PC, or somebody who's a controller, or somebody who deals with payroll, or somebody who's in human resources. Those PCs should be scanned to identify what unencrypted data a hacker could find on our network. And then finally, we need to make sure online backup is set up. So these are the elements and recommended steps. If you have questions about whether PBSI does any or all of these things for you, feel free to let us know. We'll try and communicate with each of you to let you know if there's anything we've talked about that you don't have. We'll let you know about it. Again, the purpose is of today not to sell services, but to inform. And this is a good way to help you know what actions may be useful. So, SonicWall Advanced Threat Protection can be added to firewalls. Data breach risk scanning can be added. Online backup for PCs and servers. I didn't mention web monitoring, where we can track the bandwidth usage and website usage, and we can block and filter, but we can track web usage for each PC, each server, each application. It's less critical and harder to interpret, but it's available, and we also do this KnowBe4 ongoing training. We can do a dark web password search, and we can help do security risk assessments. If you haven't had one done, it's a really useful thing to do, and in some cases, if you're a healthcare practice, it's required that you have a risk assessment done. And it's easy to check the boxes without really having a risk assessment done, but we can do a helpful and thorough job. So those are some of the things that are available. We are finished with content. I want to thank you for your attendance, and you are welcome to log off.